The City of Tallahassee's Environmental Policy and Energy Resources Department recently hosted Sustainable You, North Florida's premier sustainability conference. As part of this conference, area thought leaders shared how they're changing the way we view sustainability and how their innovative approaches to collaboration are creating stronger businesses, relationships, and communities. Inspired by the nonprofit TED Talks, Tally Talks highlights collaboration success stories from City Commissioner Andrew Gillum, Atira Charles with Florida A&M University, and Ryan Cohen with Sachs Media Group. On this episode of On Location, we'll give you a front row seat to all the inspiring dialogue from the Tally Talks.
So about 2 years ago, I came up with this concept. It's called the opaque ceiling effect. It was based on this trend I was seeing in social media, where every single day, people were being exposed to what their friends, their family, their acquaintances, their colleagues, their coworkers were doing, were eating, were seeing, all through social media. That view, that voyeuristic exploration into the lives of others was transforming how we would trust. Trust in our friends, in our businesses, in our government agencies and officials. And it's something that was worth examining, because this newfound interest, this desire for trust and transparency, wasn't just making us trust those similar to us that we were exposed to every day, but it was leading to an epidemic of distrust in those who we couldn't see. Those non-transparent government officials or businesses that basically, in terms of the opaque ceiling effect, we could see people on our level every day, know and trust them, but we couldn't see above us into the boardroom. That distrust has hurt businesses and government agencies over the last few years. And we've seen that according to the 2014 Edelman Trust Barometer, the top global trust examination study that was just put out last week. Government agencies are suffering from this crisis, constantly falling year after year due to divisiveness, partisan politics, and most of all, a lack of transparency. If we want our sustainability efforts to actually come to fruition, to be successful and resonate throughout our communities, we have to be authentic, we have to be genuine, and we have to empower the citizens in our communities and throughout our society. There are many companies, though, that over the last 2 years since I coined this concept of the opaque ceiling effect are doing this every day. From Zappos to GE, we're seeing this openness, this transparency change our society. But we need to bring more organizations into the mix. There are many ways that we can do this, and we've even seen it and implemented it in our own communities. Late this last year, my firm, Sachs Media Group, partnered with, actually, one of the top sponsors of this event, the 4 Points by Sheraton Tallahassee Downtown Hotel, to create the Finish the Block campaign. It was a campaign that you may have seen, where they had recently purchased the old Maze Monroe building on Tennessee Street. They were trying to figure out what they were going to do with the space. They had some ideas, but they said, you know what? When we make this transformation, because we're focused on sustainability and reaching out into the community, we're going to do just that. We did this through a variety of steps, and we saw that through 3 key concepts, we were successful to the point of receiving, in a short 2-week period, over 100 comments across social media, and we reached over 10,000 community members in Tallahassee with this message of pro-sustainability and community engagement. Those 3 key concepts were targeting, ownership, and making it easy. targeting first. So in order to reach the right kind of people, we had to go to where they were. There have been a variety of different apps, campaigns, and websites in the past that have tried to reach out to the community by building their own resource. While they were well-intentioned, they came across a variety of issues, mainly that the audiences that they were trying to reach didn't want to go somewhere else. They were used to being in places like Facebook, Twitter, different forums, YouTube, etc. They were comfortable there, they were there every day, and they didn't want to leave. By reaching out to these people, the exact people, and knowing how to reach them, whether it's through partnerships or advertising, you're able to get to the right people, avoid the clutter, and make your message stick much more so. We were able to craft our message to resonate with who we wanted to the most and help to build that trust by partnering with organizations that were already trusted. When you can bring together that coalition of different organizations under one roof, especially ones that you can work with that people already trust, that adds a whole other level to the campaign. Suddenly, people aren't looking at your sustainability effort going, did they have an ulterior motive here? Are they just doing this for the value and press and trying to make themselves look better PR-wise? But they see, wow, this organization is partnering with different NGOs, government groups, nonprofits, etc., that I already know and trust. Also, by using targeted advertising, specifically on social media like Facebook and Twitter, we can target by not just demographics, so people's age, location, but also their interests, what they're talking about. One of the biggest problems that we see from government agencies and from businesses each day on social media is that they message based on what they want to talk about, not what we want to talk about and what we are already talking about. When you can join those messages together, though, and resonate even more so based on creating that unified conversation, people feel much more engaged and active and interested. But once you've reached them, once you've gotten to them with that polished message, you've got to make sure that they take ownership over it, that they feel like you actually want to get their reactions. Honestly, the most difficult part for so many organizations is simply the authenticity. Actually sitting back and saying, you know what? We're going to give up a little bit of control because we want to know what you think. The options are endless. But just like we saw with the Sheridan and the Finish the Block campaign, as well as many other organizations, like I mentioned, from Zappos to GE, there are opportunities galore to take sustainability programs, get communities involved and active, make them feel like it's the program themselves that they wanted, that they take ownership over, and they want to spread throughout their networks. Because I'll tell you, if you get community opt-in and support, and you have a great program, you don't have to sell it. Your evangelists, your top supporters, will sell it themselves. So today we looked at this concept, this issue of trust and its relationship to social media, the positives and negatives when communicating our sustainability programs to our communities, and the challenges faced when we try to get that engagement and the citizen empowerment programs. We can all do this, but it's going to take the right implementation to make our ideas expand and resonate throughout our communities. Because the greatest idea in the world is only an idea unless it's implemented properly. Thank you.
Karen's my best friend.
I paid her $10 to say that.
I couldn't believe that my friend of 30-something years was a possible donor, that she was more excited than I was. And I'd say, Kier, you're not going on a cruise here. You're like giving me a kidney.
I can make my friend's life better. This was the right thing to do.
Thank you, Kier.
Have a kit so you're ready for any emergency. Develop a plan for what you and your family will do before disaster strikes. And stay informed during severe weather any way you can. Visit ready.gov for ways to prepare your family for emergencies.
I would like for us to think about a flower. We see them every day. We walk by them. Some of us even buy them. But I would like us to kind of all close our eyes for a moment. And I'd like you to envision the most beautiful flower that you've ever seen. I would like for you to think about the size of the flower. I'd like for you to think about how many petals it has. I'd like you to think about the colors of the flower. I'd also like you to think about how that flower smells. I'd like you to think about the habitat of the flower. Is the flower in a garden? The flower in a vase? Was the flower in the store? Was the flower at Costco, right? And now as you think about this flower, I want you to think about all of the unique and diverse attributes and characteristics that this flower has. And everyone can open their eyes now. And now what I'd like for you to do is imagine yourself as that flower. What are the different petals that you have and you hold that make you unique? How tall or short do you feel? What types of aromas and energies, right, are you presenting to the world like your flower? Is your flower a little wilted some days, right? Or is your flower just blossoming and blooming bright? Now, in theory, when we think about flowers, we think about flowers in the context of fertile soil, right? Nice, rich soil, like our plants here. And so flowers, if they are not in a fertile space, we assume will die or cannot grow in another space. But what I'd like for you all to think about, everybody right now, think about a time when you were walking down a concrete path in an urban environment, such as Tallahassee. And you're walking and you're walking, and you assume that our concrete should have no cracks. Right? But you're walking and you're walking, and then you see a little flower. And you ask yourself, where did this flower come from? This concrete's supposed to be perfect. The city of Tallahassee was supposed to get that right? Why is there a crack in the concrete? And what I would like for us to think about is the fact that while there may be threats to the flower, there's also opportunities in places that we never think that there are. Now let's take this whole concept of a flower growing through the concrete and bring it back into our own individual lives. Let's also take this concept of a flower and the different petals that it has and bring it back into our lives. So we all have various identities, right? That make up and comprise who we are. So for example, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a professor, I'm a business owner, and a million other things. And I like to karaoke, right? So right now, I am in my professor mode, right? I'm professing. And so that is what's salient to me. However, in a moment, I can potentially switch to my mother identity or my professional identity in other spaces. And so what I want all of you to start to do is understand that you are a flower with numerous petals that all come with different unique attributes and traits that you can contribute to the world. Now, remember we talked about the concrete and the cracks. We have cracks too, right? We have psychological cracks. We have emotional cracks, okay? And when we have these cracks, our first thought is to do what? Cover them up, right? But if we continue to cover up the different cracks, our different flaws, then we're not allowing ourselves to have moments to grow. So when we think about our cracks as an opportunity for growth, and when we think about our cracks as an opportunity to understand our authentic selves, we now have an opportunity to build our own fertile soil, okay? Now, when we bring this to our communities, what we really have to understand is the same way we have to show ourselves who we are by our strengths and our weaknesses, our assets and our liabilities, is the same way we have to hold that same lens up to our own communities. Because this is the power of numbers. When one person does it, people follow. So if we all commit today to go back out into our worlds and show people that no matter what the barrier, no matter what your concrete is, you can grow through and you can push through. And a lot of times we stay very safe within our own cocoons, right? But we have to take the moments. We have to take these moments of stillness to sit and say, self, what do I need to do for me? Self, what is there that I'm not acknowledging about myself? Okay? So everybody, let's practice. Self. Okay, oh, that was good. Okay. Now, I'm not going to give you a question to ask because you have to figure that out for yourself, okay? You have to figure out what your self question is because we all have different questions because we're all different flowers. So what I would like everyone to think about is this other metaphor of a cocoon, okay? A caterpillar is within the cocoon. It sees, if it only sees from the inside, it just thinks that it's locked in somewhere, right? This dark, fuzzy, crazy looking thing. But as it continues to open up, if it was afraid, right, of what's out in the world, it would continue to patch up, close up, stay in. I don't want to go out into the world. I don't want to expose myself. But if that little creature knew that it could become a butterfly, wouldn't it want to break through? So I want you guys to think about what is the concrete that I am having that is holding me back, that I can grow through? And what cocoon am I potentially staying within that's not allowing my authentic and best self to come out? So I charge you all today with being aware of your petals, being aware of the limitations and threats to the beauty of your flower, but also understanding that you have all of the potential within to push through that so we can create an awesome garden here in Tallahassee. Thank you.
I am here to save lives.
What happened?
He came from out of nowhere.
When people need help, I respond.
During a crisis, I remain calm.
She's got a head injury.
I am a 911 dispatcher, and you can be one too.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
The Consolidated Dispatch Agency has openings for public safety communications operators. Dispatchers earn nearly $30,000 a year with benefits, receive on-the-job training, and have a flexible schedule. If you want to save lives, visit talgov.com and apply today.
We are this close
Of wanting
to making history.
We are this close.
We are this close to ending polio.
All we need is you.
This close.
Be a part of history at Rotary.org.
I tell you, when they first asked me to participate in this part of the program for the Sustainable You Conference, of course, my immediate reaction was nervousness, like, nah, probably can't do that one. And then my mind, as I started to think on it, immediately then went to growing up as a young boy in Miami, Florida, and going to school, of course, all day, and then running back home, seeing my mother in the kitchen cooking. And during that time, recycling and the recycling agenda was so big in the public schools. The first thing you wanted to do anytime you came home was to share with your mother or your father what it was that you had learned. And for me, it was the blue bin and the green bin. And my mother, who is a fantastic cook, but didn't pay a whole bunch of attention to that green bin and that blue bin, would annoy the heck out of me because I would have to stand there and pretty much police where every one of these discarded containers went. Pretty soon, when I would get home from school, she had banned me from the kitchen because I was every day saying, "Ma, no, that's in the wrong bin. You got to put it in the other bin." And pretty soon she said, "Boy, get out of my kitchen and stay out for that matter." And so that was really my orientation to if you will, recycling, sustainability, livable lifestyles. And of course, as we sit and stand here today, this whole issue has taken on another form, and it means something completely different for ourselves and for our lives. One great Indian saying is that we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, rather we borrow it from our children. And what an important saying as we think about this area of creating the future that we want to leave for those who come behind us. Shortly after graduating from Florida A&M University, I had worked and had volunteered on political campaigns, mainly at the national level. I was always that eager person who was willing to sign up, volunteer, go door to door, knock on doors, recruit volunteers, turn people out to vote. And of course, these folks would end up in office, undoubtedly, many of them, and some of them would lose. And they'd go off to Washington, D.C., and they'd make these decisions and cast these votes. Sometimes they get up there, and the actions that they would take would be contrary to what I told people when I was knocking on people's doors saying why they ought to endorse and support this person. And pretty soon, it began to get pretty frustrating. Watching what was happening, not only in our state capital, but in our national capital. The intransigence that exists today, in many ways, still had its life in the 90s and into the early 2000s. It's not a new thing, if you will. And so we started thinking, well, how do you create the future that you want to see for yourselves and for our country? And so I ended up helping to start this program called Young People For. And Young People For is this national program where on college campuses all across this country, we recruit young people, Ivy League institutions, state universities, historically black colleges and universities, women-serving institutions, Native American reservations. And what we were doing with these young people was trying to equip them with the knowledge and skills and tools that they would need if they were one day going to serve in leadership on their college campuses or in their communities, making sure that they had everything that they needed to be the type of leaders that we wanted for our futures. I then took a little brief break away from that work from the founding staff of Young People For to run for office myself right here in Tallahassee, Florida. And so I ended up running for public office for the City Commission, and I went on my first conference to the League of Cities. And while at the League of Cities, and again, I'm 23 at this time, I was getting up and I was in the back of the room at a break station, and one elected official asked me if I could refresh his coffee. I think he thought I was some of the wait staff, and that was okay. When I proceeded to tell him that I too was an elected official, he told me that he had shoes and socks older than me. And of course, I wanted to tell him, you ought to update your wardrobe. I was respectful and proceeded to go ahead and refresh his coffee. And that was a joke that I encountered constantly as I attended the conference circuit as a young elected official. And so I started going through my little Rolodex, trying to figure out who were some of these other young people that I had met along the way who were also young and also elected. And I was able to come up with about 5 or 6 friends, and we got together in Atlanta. And I said, what if we were to create an organization for young people just like us, who were young and new in elective office, who had ideas, were innovative, and wanted to do something different, and were prepared to sort of buck the system and not necessarily wait our turn in order to serve. And so we said, great idea, let's come together, and we'll come together around 3 principles. 1, networking, building a nationwide network for people who were just like us. 2, that we would support each other with personal and leadership development training. What we couldn't get by way of age on this earth and work experience, we needed to get through training. And then 3rd, that we would create a policy shop that would allow us to exchange ideas with each other, but also borrow some of the best ideas out there in the country and bring back to our communities. That network then had its first gathering in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club, and we brought in 67 other young elected officials across the country. We initially thought that our name would be 35 under 35 because we didn't think there were more than 35 of us in the country. And then we stumbled on some research at the Rutgers University Eagleton Institute of Politics that said of all elected officials in the country, that elected officials aged 35 and younger were just 4.8% of all elected officials, roughly 900 or so at the time. And so we started a search to find who they were. And today that nationwide network has now grown to a network of over 800 elected officials all across this country, and I'm proud to serve as its executive director. And then we started to think, how do we, again, in the tradition of creating the future that we want to see, begin about generating a new generation of young people who would then come along to take our place? And so we started a program called the Frontline Leaders Academy, which is intended to be an 8-month-long program that you could do in your own city, and you would come off to these trainings. And we would train you on what it meant to be a candidate, campaign manager, finance director, field organizer, communication specialist, all the core competencies that you would need if you were going to one day run for office or to help others run for office and be successful, under the idea that we had to train these folks if they were going to buck the systems where they lived, rise up to leadership, and innovate in their own communities, that they were going to need to know what it took. Again, in the spirit of creating the change that you'd like to see. And so what if we in this city were audacious enough to begin to create the change that we wanted to see for ourselves and for our future? But in order to get there, it takes all of us. So what if, again, we had the audacity to begin these kinds of community conversations, courageous conversations about what happens on a Tennessee street when you go from 4 lanes to 6 lanes right in the area where you want to stimulate bikeability and walkability as you approach Florida State University? What if we were to turn that on its head and think about and reimagine a street that had parking and biking and multimodal use on its outer lanes? Radical ideas, but is that part of the future that we want to create for ourselves? And the ideas go on and on and on and on and on from there. And so, folks, I hope that you'll join us. By your signature here today, you're already signaturing that you're looking forward to the future, and the best is still yet to come. And now we just got to get to work to make it happen. Thank you for your time, and God bless you.
Thanks for watching this episode of On Location. As you reflect back on each of our presenters' success stories, we hope you find the inspiration to create your own success story here in our community. For WCOT, I'm Missy Tuttle, and we'll see you next time, somewhere on location.